What's up guys, welcome back to another GGF video, and today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new Dark Base Pro 900 Rev 2 from Be Quiet. Now you may have seen our time-lapse video we posted a few days ago, but in this video we'll be going in a full in-depth review on this chassis. We'll be covering the new features like the addition of a PSU shroud and some other features inside, so we'll jump in and we'll see how it all goes. Just where to start, the Dark Base Pro 900 Revision 2 is one of the most well thought out and functional cases I've looked at. Also, a case where RGB wasn't a design priority, but more of an afterthought. Be Quiet's main intention on the Rev 2 was to create the most functional case on the market. If you're thinking you've seen this case before, then you're not far off. From the outside, the case looks very familiar to the original Dark Base Pro 900. But inside, we see a very refreshed, up-to-date interior incorporating features from the more newer Dark Base Pro 700. We've received the classic Be Quiet black and orange colour, with beautiful brushed aluminium for the front and top with orange trim. The Dark Base Pro 900 Rev 2 comes in at 586mm high, 577mm long and 243mm wide, and with a weight of 15.5 kilograms. The case is made from 1mm SECC steel, 0.8mm aluminium, ABS plastic and tempered glass. I'd say the glass is of a medium tint and has a slight yellow tinge to it. The overall chassis feels of a very high quality and structurally strong, even when stripped down to the bare minimum. The Dark Base Pro 900 Rev 2 comes pre-installed with three 140mm Silent Wings 3 fans. In this review, I'll be focusing more on the new features as well as custom water cooling support, as the main chassis frame is exactly the same as the original Dark Base Pro 900. I won't spend too much time in that area. For those who aren't familiar with the Dark Base Pro 900 design, it is one of the only cases on the market with a fully adjustable motherboard tray. This tray can be removed for easy motherboard installation. It also has the ability to slide up and down once in the chassis, giving you better flexibility when it comes to your build. There's also the option to fully flip the motherboard tray to invert your build. The amount of adjusting and fine tuning you can do is just astounding. In this review and build, I'll be going with the inverted option and I'll explain why later. Removing the motherboard tray is very easy. Simply remove 9 screws and out it comes. There's also extra screw holes to slide the tray up and down, as I mentioned before. Moving around the back, Be Quiet have also added small cover inserts to fill the blank gaps when you've decided on your final resting spot for your motherboard. If you do decide to go with the inverted option, the 4mm tempered glass side panel comes over to the other side as well. Simply unscrew the 4 side panel mounts and install them on the other side. The main feature Be Quiet has added in the Rev 2 is a full-length PSU shroud. I've worked with a lot of cases with PSU shrouds, and this one is up there with some of the best. There's always a few things I look for when it comes to a PSU cover. Is it removable and is it multifunctional? Be Quiet gets a tick for both. Having the ability to invert the motherboard to the other side of the chassis means the PSU shroud needs to be removed and installed on the other side. The shroud is secured in via the bottom front edge, as well as some screw down points around the back. One thing you may have noticed is the shroud doesn't go all the way to the back of the chassis. I do like this, as there's no need for deciding where to put cable grommet holes, and because the shroud needs to accommodate a motherboard either upright or upside down, having this as just one continuous gap was the best way to go. The PSU shroud also has pop-out covers. With all covers on, you have a clean, sleek look. With all covers off, you're presented with two 120mm mesh fan mounts. Also, these spots can be used for a pump res combo. Then there's a single SSD location. Install your SSD in the included sled, then slide it in. I just love how the SSD drops in and gives you this almost flush look. Motherboard support is up to eATX, but it is noted that when using an eATX motherboard, the main row of cable grommet holes will be covered, but Be Quiet have a few backup options for cable routing. One option is via the gap between the PSU shroud, while the other is via the cable routing covers where the hard drive brackets go. These covers are a new feature in the Rev 2 and can be used in place of the 3 provided hard drive cages. If not required, they can be pushed all the way back, but when required, they have 2 adjustment settings depending on how many cables you're trying to fit through. I like this idea, as you can just pop out the required covers you need for the cables you're using. Just note that if installing a front radiator, you won't be able to use these covers to route cables through, as they need to be pushed all the way back for radiator clearance. Moving on to radiator support, both the top and front can support up to a 420mm radiator, but not both at once. Even a 420mm radiator with a 360 is a tight fit, and I could only fit a 420 at the front with the ports at the bottom and then a 360 at the top. I had no issues running two 360mm radiators. Front radiator thickness is up to 60mm if you wish to keep the PSU cover installed, as there is a 62mm cutout in the shroud. Also, this is providing if you install the fans right inside the front panel, which is how they come pre-installed in the first place, with your motherboard in a standard ATX layout and in its middle position. Top clearance is up to 60 to 65mm. You can install the fans at the very top on the inside cover, but I don't recommend doing this as the fans will be 100% choked. Now this is where things get interesting and why I've gone with an inverted layout for my build. If running an inverted layout with the motherboard tray in its middle position, top radiator thickness is improved dramatically. If you're not using your very last motherboard's PCIe slots, then rad thickness is basically unlimited. I've managed to install a 53mm thick radiator and fans which total 78mm, and there's still plenty of room. If the custom water cooling scene isn't for you, all-in-one coolers also feel right at home and you'll have no issues at the top or at the front. As the rear of the chassis has dedicated holes only for a 120 or 140mm config, I would say this spot is really just for a fan and not intended for radiator support. As the case has covered front and top panels, airflow is going to be a bit restrictive. Mesh does run the full length of the sides at the front and the top, but we all know nothing beats 100% mesh. The top also has a few cutouts at the back for extra exhaust. Removable dust filters are included at the front and a full length filter at the bottom. Both top, inside the door and the rear side panel are all covered with sound dampening material, which is a nice touch. Storage options are plentiful with a two 3.5-inch drive cage installed under the PSU shroud, but it is to be noted that if installing a 420 or 360mm front radiator, this hard drive cage will need to be removed. Be Quiet have also included 3 more cages that can be installed on the inside wall next to the motherboard. These go in place of the cable routing covers which I mentioned earlier, but once again, if installing a front radiator, these cages cannot be installed. SSDs can be installed in any of the hard drive caddies, and there's also 2 dedicated SSD spots, one behind the motherboard tray and one on the PSU shroud which I mentioned earlier. For those still after optical bays, the Darkbase Pro Rev 2 has you covered with 2 available at the top. Each come with a front pop-out cover which includes a dust filter. The 5.25-inch bay can be removed if needed. Also, for those with personal preference, the front door hinges can also be swapped around to have the door open from either left or the right side. Included in the rear of the chassis is a multifunctional fan and LED controller. Here we have control for up to 8 PW fans, 2 channels, 4 fans for each. Plus there's an output for motherboard PWM control and control for 2 RGB LED strips which come supplied in the box. External RGB control has been added for users wanting to use their motherboard's built-in software. Fan control can be switched from PWM mode or performance mode via 2 switches on the PCB, 1 for each channel. Front I/O we see 2 USB 3.0 ports, audio jacks, power button, power LED, RGB LED control button, hard drive LED, USB Type-C port which is nice to see, and lastly a quick charge USB port. Another interesting feature in the Darkbase Pro 900 series is the built-in Qi charging pad on the top. This was on the original Pro 900 and has been brought over again on the Rev 2 model. Now just a few things I haven't covered yet. The chassis does come with a universal pump res combo bracket. Now this is a neat little feature. It did come in the previous revision, but this does clip on to any of the hard drive caddies that screw into the case. It also fits on the one at the very bottom. It just simply clips on and it screws in either side. Now I didn't use this because the issue is that this will only go on the hard drive caddies, and if you're using a front radiator you can't have any of the hard drive caddies in, so I couldn't use this, and I ended up just mounting my pump res combo on top of the PSU shroud, which I think does work a little bit better. You've got a little bit more room. You definitely can mount a radiator in the front like I've done, and then you've got all these holes on that PSU shroud just where the fan can go on here. So I just lined up some of the holes and I could get my pump res combo to screw in no problems at all. There's also a hidden fan controller inside the front door that connects back to that sort of controller hub on the rear of the chassis. You can set it to either PWM mode or you can set it to be controlled via that little by the little slider at the front, and that's a nice little touch. Underneath, I didn't cover underneath the PSU shroud. I didn't think it was too important, but there are two fan mounts for either two 140mm or two 120mm fans just down the bottom before the power supply. But I think most people aren't going to use them, especially if you are using the PSU shroud. You're definitely not going to want to put fans in there, and it's just not going to have any room either as well. Rear clearance all round for the case was good. CPU height, you'll have no problems. GPU, you'll have no problems, especially GPU length. Like this is an EVGA 1080 Ti. I still have heaps of room, and I've got the reservoir in there and so on. Clearance around the rear behind the motherboard tray was a little bit tight. It was around 15 to 20mm in areas. Now 15mm is pretty tight, and it was even harder to get the side panel on because, be quiet, they did this in the original revision, is they've got sort of a cutout for vents, and if you've got that closed off, it sort of protrudes inside the case. So I had to pop it out so the vents were pushed out, so that made it a little bit more on the inside. And also with that sound dampening material on that side panel, it doesn't give you as much clearance as if that wasn't there. Lastly, I want to cover price. Haven't covered that yet. You're looking at about $279 US dollars or 349 Australian dollars. Now that's roughly about $20 more above the standard revision. So for the Rev 2, $20 more, you're getting the PSU shroud and some other few little features. Now the chassis comes in orange black, which I've got here, comes in all black, or it comes in silver black, where the silver just replaces the orange with silver. So I got 3 models there. I'm pretty sure that's the same as the first revision, but I do remember Be Quiet did release a all white limited edition, so I'm not sure if they'll do that on this one as well. Now that's pretty much everything on the case cover. I just want to cover sort of the build layout I had a lot of responses on the time-lapse video already. That's been up for a few days. A lot of people, it's 50-50 on an inverted layout. Now yes, a lot of your logos will be upside down. Things like GPU terminals, they can be reversed. I just didn't want to pull apart this whole block just to flick this terminal around, because I will be using this in a build pretty much in a few days time, so I'll have to switch that back. But yes, this probably could have been switched around, and I know most custom blocks can be switched around as well. I guess if you're running an air-cooled GPU, that is a different scenario. Depending on which brand you have, logos will definitely be upside down. Motherboards aren't too bad. This EVGA X299 for the win doesn't really have too many logos on it. There's just one on the VRM heatsink there, but you can't really see that. Memory's not too bad, because memory is normally either directional, it's not up and down. They don't normally have it horizontal, so when you flip it, it's not going to be too bad. But yeah, apart from that, I really wanted to go with the inverted layout because you can fit a much thicker radiator at the top, because you've got your RAM down the bottom and your VRM heatsink, so all the bulky parts are at the bottom. You don't really have any clearance issues there. So when you're doing a liquid cooled build, your main clearance issues are up the top where you're putting your top radiator, and I don't have anything at all, providing you're not using the very bottom slot on your motherboard, which is actually hidden behind this radiator. I could have gone with like a 60, I could have even gone with like an 80mm monster radiator, and I still would have had room. Yes, it would have come down to about here, but there still would have been room to fit that in, providing, as I said, I don't need to get to those slots. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it on this video. I really do like this case. I think adding these few little features was a nice touch. I'm not sure if they had to bring out a whole new chassis, but it's kind of hard to say, because there are a lot of areas where they had to add tie down points for the PSU shroud. I must admit the PSU shroud has been done very well. It's screwed in at the front, it's screwed in at the back. It's very solid indeed. Like I got this pump res sitting on it. It doesn't even flex, it doesn't even move. So I was very happy with how they did that. But yeah, this is pretty much it on this review. Just want to thank Be Quiet for sending this out. I want to thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for next time.